Hi everyone, Nick Tomlin here, aka DJ Sai, bringing you my first YouTube video today. And as the title indicates, it's Intricacies that make a difference. And what I mean by that is they're small factors in the game. They're not huge, but they can really make a difference. And they're just really small things that are even can be considered the game outside of the game. And things you can do to, I guess, just maximize your chances of winning and giving yourself the best chance of winning and drawing what you want. The first case I'm going to go over, you might have heard it before, is the Upstart versus Duality debate. And not even really a debate, but if you have Upstart and Duality together, you always want to play the Upstart first and then Duality. The reason for this is because when I play Pot of Duality, I get to choose between 3 cards. So I have a little bit of control over what card that I get here. I don't have the greatest amount of control. It's not a generic search card, but I still get to control what I draw. With Upstart, I don't know what I draw. I just draw a card. It's like I draw it, it's the next card in my deck. It's not going to influence having Upstart in my hand isn't going to influence what I grab with Duality at all, because I don't know what I'm going to get with Upstart. But if I play Upstart and get the card that I want, as long as I don't draw another Upstart, but I play Upstart, I draw a Phoenix Chain, and then I play Pot of Duality. Now I know all the cards in my hand, so I can make a more informed decision of what I grab with Pot of Duality. Instead, with Upstart, I didn't know what that card would be. So the idea is you play the Upstart so you know all the cards that you have already, and then you play Duality, and you can make a much more informed decision than you would have if you played Upstart. See, the fact that I drew a Phoenix Chain here might influence what I grab with Duality. I don't know what I would grab, but the idea is Upstart first, then Duality. There's no exception to that rule, really. You almost always want to Upstart and Duality. I can't think of an exception off the top of my head, so there probably isn't one. At least not an obvious one. So that's that. Now let's say instead of having Duality and Upstart, let's say I had Yugioh Arsenal and Upstart. Now this one is a little less cut and dry than Upstart versus Duality, and there's no real guaranteed rule there's no guaranteed you always do this in this situation, that you always do this in that situation. It's a little bit more of a guideline that I can tell you that would make you decide whether you wanted to do one or the other first. Now I'm using Yugioh as an example because it's a very good baseline to go off of, and it works well with every example that I have listed here. But for this one, this deck is playing 13 monsters. A little bit of background. It'll make a difference in a second. Now, ultimately, you want to decide whether you want to draw a monster off of Upstart or you want to draw a trap card off of Upstart. That's ultimately the guiding choice. That's ultimately the biggest contributing factor of whether you want to play Upstart first or use the Arsenal to grab armor first. Now, let's say I have 11 cards in my deck, or I have 11 monsters left in my deck, and 35 cards. And in this hand, I would probably want another trap card, because in this deck, you never really want more than 2 monsters anyway. You want, this is perfect amount of monsters. I want another trap card. Now, if I consider trap cards as non-monsters, well, actually, that's not true. It's not non-monsters. It's, well, let's just make it more simple and just say I want to draw a non-monster instead of drawing a trap card. I have 11 monsters in my deck out of 35 cards, so the probability of drawing a monster with Upstart is 31.4%, which makes the probability of drawing a non-monster 68.6%. Now, if I play Arsenal, get armor, so I take a monster out of my deck, but I also take a card out of my deck. Taking the monster out of your deck is going to predominate over taking a card out of your deck. So now I have 10 monsters out of 34 cards. So the probability of drawing a monster will be 29.4%, and the probability of drawing a non-monster is 70.6%. The probability went up. So in this case, if I play Upstart, I might actually draw a trap. And of course I didn't. Yeah. You might not get what you want. The point being is you're manipulating your draws just a little bit, and that little bit can really make a difference between drawing a monster or drawing a trap card. There's a good chance you would still win with this hand, but the point still stands. Alright, now let's say on the other side of the coin, if I had a handful of, in that case I wanted a trap card, let's say instead I had Arsenal, Upstart. Let's say I had this hand, but I had another trap. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. Let's get compulsory. Now in this case, I probably want to draw a monster. And there's one card you can draw with this hand that would actually influence the play that you make, and that would be Accelerator. So in this case, if you want a monster, you definitely play the Upstart first. Because number one, if you draw Accelerator, then instead of arsenaling for armor, you're going to arsenal for Yugioh, or Yugioh to get this back, and the special Accelerator to make Gig and X. So in this case, you want to Upstart first if you want a monster, which in this case I think you would. You have enough traps. And of course, that's your trap card. This hand's still really good though, but my point stands. In cases like that, usually when you have a search card versus an Upstart, there are concrete rules for some things, especially in Necros, but you just have to think about your ratios in your deck and what you would want to draw with Upstart. That's the main driving force of what it is. Now, for the next example, let's say I have a set of Duality. Let's put this on the top of my deck and grab an armor. This is really important because I see people do this all the time and they're jumping the gun and they're not thinking about what they have. An average to newer player with this hand would likely go set armor, set all the traps, and play Duality. This is not the right way to play this. If you do this, you're basically giving away to your opponent that you're a less experienced player. Honestly, like if somebody did this against me, I would think they're a less experienced player. Because this does two things. Number one, when you play Duality, if you get a trap card and you take the trap card and you set it, you've completely given away where that trap card is to your opponent. So let's say I take a Torrential and I set it, I've told them the Torrential's right here. However, if I did this beforehand, let's say I didn't set anything, and I play the Duality and I grab the Torrential, then I can set armor and set everything at once. And I don't give my opponent any information about what my back rows are, or where my back rows are. They just know I have a Torrential, but they don't know where the Torrential is, so they're not going to be able to snipe it with MST if they want to play around Torrential, or Night Beam, or whatever card that they might have. In addition, sorry, that doesn't matter. In addition, I don't think I would grab the Arsenal here. I think I would just grab the extra trap cards since I have armor, gear. But you might get a monster that would make it so you don't actually want to set gear armor. Let's say this armor was Arsenal instead, and I play Duality, and I got a what's the card called? And I got an armor. Then I would set the armor and not use the Arsenal. Well, I wouldn't be able to use the Arsenal because of Duality. Never mind. Forget that. But the idea is not only will it tell your opponent the back rows that you have and where that card is that you added, but sometimes the card you get with Duality can completely change the way you play. So the take-home point here is always play Duality before you do anything else. Before you set a monster, before you set any of your back rows, always play Duality first. If you're going to play Duality that turn, if you be certain you actually want to play it. Because I mean, if you had Arsenal and Duality together, you're going to want to Arsenal for the monster if you don't have any other monsters. But yeah, always play Duality first if you're going to play Duality. And that's the reason why. Now, going along with that is the idea, you can't do this on Dueling Network, but usually in playing in real life, if you the way you set your back rows can indicate a lot to your opponent about what they are. Let's say I confidently set gear, and then I think a little bit about setting this, and then I pick it back out to my hand, and I think a little bit, you know what people do. They set one, and they think about setting one, and they're kind of iffy on it. This can give your opponent a little bit of information about what your sets actually are. Not necessarily what they are, but how good they are. Like, if you confidently set a back row, and then you're kind of iffy about the other back row, and they say they want to blind MST something, they're going to blind MST the one you confidently set because they kind of know that you want to set that card, so it's a real back row. If you're kind of iffy on whether or not you want to set something, that can more or less be indicative that that's a bluff, or something that's not as good as the card you just set. The way to not give this away to your opponent is, you might see good players do this, or most players do this, is take all the back rows, like, first, get it straight in your head about which back rows you're going to set for your turn. Put them face down, shuffle them, and then just spread them all out. Like, you can't do this on DN. You have to set them one at a time, which is, I don't think they're going to be able to make it so that you can just set them all at once. But when you're playing in real life, that's the best way to not give away any information to your opponent about which back rows are which back rows are real, which back rows are less real. Nothing like that. When I say real, I mean a back row that actually, that's not a bluff. We'll just say a real back row is a back row that's not a bluff. So, yeah, take home point here. Get it straight in your head about which back rows you want to set. Shuffle them face down and just set them all. Spread them all out. That way you won't give any information to your opponent at all. Now, next point. What's the best way to? Yeah, okay, that works. Okay, let's get this to my hand. Let's put that back. Yeah, top deck. Let's say I dualitied for my turn, and I grabbed a Yugioh arsenal. And the Yugioh arsenal that I grabbed was a rare. And then I drew a second Yugioh arsenal for turn. Let's say I'm drawing for turn. Let's put this back. Let's put the torrential back. Let's put it in the grave. It's fine. And I draw another Yugioh arsenal for turn. So I'm going to shuffle my hand a little bit. They know I have one Yugioh arsenal from duality, like whatever. And I drew a second Yugioh arsenal. One's a rare, one's a super. And let's say I added the super with the duality, and then I summon the rare. Me summoning the rare just gave away to my opponent that I had two arsenals, because they know I have a super in my hand and I just summoned a rare. They know that the arsenal that I summoned is different from the one that I added with duality. Now, had I summoned, like, you can't tell the rarities on DN, but it's hard to illustrate that. But if I summoned the super, if I summoned the same one that I searched, I don't give away any information at all to my opponent. I just, I summoned the one that I searched. I did a logical play. I dualitied for arsenal. I can't use that arsenal because I played duality. So the next turn I summon arsenal. I summon the same arsenal. So there are two remedies to this. The first is have the rarities of all the cards in your deck match. I know it can be a little difficult, but have them all match. If you're going to play super arsenal, play all super arsenals. If you're going to play rares, play all rares. The same goes for Phoenix Chains. If you're going to play Phoenix Chains, play all commons, all mosaic rares, all supers, all secrets, whatever. Because in that way, if you don't have to worry about thinking, oh crap, which one did I draw, which one did I add, which one does my opponent know that I have, which one that I don't. You can just play the way that you normally do without even thinking about it. If you don't, like, let's say you're building your deck really last minute and you have to use mismatch rarities, then you got to be very, very cognizant of which one that you added and which one your opponent knows that you have, and summon the same one at the very least, so that you don't give away any free information to your opponent. Information can go a really long way, trust me when I say that. So if you're going to have mismatch rarities, like, I would just recommend having your rarities match. If you can't get them all higher rarity, bump them down to the lowest rarity and have all rares. Playing low rarity isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's better than just giving away information to your opponent. So I would just personally recommend having the rarities match so you don't have to think about it. It gives you one less thing to think about in the match. Last point is a little more in your, well, okay. This one's a lot more subtle, but it still is a thing. Let's say I have, the only two monsters you ever really set in this deck are Yugioh and Arsenal, or Yugioh and Armor. Let's say I have these two in my hand. Now, Armor, naturally as a super rare, some of them are going to bend, and they're going to bend upward. So when you set them, they'll be kind of popping up from your mat. The same goes for Fire and Ice Hand. Like a more modern example, a more current example would be Fire and Ice Hand. But yeah, they bend up and they pop up on your mat, just naturally because they're hollow. And that can give away to your opponent what you actually set. Like, the same goes for back rows. Yugioh is another example of a card that you set that it would kind of bend in the same way as the arsenal and the hands. So this isn't the easiest thing to fix, but it's definitely possible. You can either, one, like, just bend it back into shape. Like, look at your, like, have your deck ready before you're about to play a tournament, and look through and make sure that, like, no cards are super bendy or, like, more obvious when you set them. Because let's say I have Yugioh. Yugioh is a common and it's only a common. So if I set it, it's going to behave like a common and it's going to be kind of just straight. Unless it's like damaged or bent beforehand, it's just going to look straight on your mat. Armor is going to bend up. So let's say I set a monster and it's straight. They're probably going to assume that it's Yugioh because they're going to think, oh, armor bends, and they're going to play like it's a Yugioh. Well, they might do that. I don't know if I would do that. I think I would just play normally, but if you set armor and it's bendy, like they know this card's not going to bend unless you're mind gaming them and you actually bend it yourself. But it's hard to do that with a common. Hard to make it bend like a hollow. So if you set it and it's bendy, they're more likely to play like it's an armor. If you set Yugioh, or let's say all your armors are straight, like let's say you take them and you put them under a heavy stack of books, or you just bend them back into your shape yourself. That can be kind of hard. They'll still kind of bend. Or you can put them in a little Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer for a bit and have something on top of them. Like you can do a lot of things to like unbend them so they don't look out of shape. But if you set a monster and it's straight, some people might assume it's a Yugioh and play like it's a Yugioh, but in reality it's just an armor that you straightened out yourself. And let's see, a way you can prevent them from bending beforehand is keeping them out of humid environments and keeping them out of really, really hot places. Like don't leave them out in the sun, or don't leave them right next to the air conditioner, because all the above can bend your cards out of whack and make it so, and give away give away free information to your opponent. That's like the theme of this video, is giving away information to your opponent. So to just sum it all up, what we went over today. Upstart versus Duality, always play the Upstart first and then Duality. Upstart versus Arsenal, that's dependent on whether you want to draw a monster, whether you draw a trap card. You're manipulating the ratios of your deck to draw, or at least give yourself a little bit of a higher chance to draw what you want. Always set the back rows that you want to set. Set them all at the same time. Don't set them one by one, and certainly don't set them before activating Duality, because again, that will give away free information. Have your card rarities match, so you don't have to worry about searching something and then summoning a card of a different rarity and giving away to your opponent that you have 2 of that card. And have your cards, at least your cards that are a little bit bendy, straighten them out before the tournament, so that you don't give away any free information to your opponent, so they can guess what your set monster is or what your set back rows are. Well, that's all for this video. I appreciate you for joining me, and this is DJ Sai signing out.